So they can't possibly fuck this up, right? Right? Wait, they cut out mercenaries? They cut out the clock tower? Nemesis barely shows up? Oh no.
Oh no!
Oh no! No!
Let me just start this off by saying I'm a massive fan of Resident Evil. I've completed every game in the main series, and at least tried most of the spin-offs. So this critique comes from someone who wants the best for this franchise. So let's get down to brass tacks. The Resident Evil 3 Remake is a disappointment. Given that it was released barely over a year after the RE2 remake, we should have all seen this coming. But I had faith in Capcom. For the last few years, they've slowly redeemed themselves from the days of on-disc DLC and mediocre sequels. While they had a few missteps with Street Fighter V and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, they released fan-pleasers like Devil May Cry 5 and Monster Hunter World. I've personally sunk over 500 hours into World and its expansion Iceborne. And Resident Evil as a franchise hasn't been this consistently good since RE4. So I really hope this isn't the beginning of another descent into mediocrity. My heart can't handle another Resident Evil 6. Capcom is releasing another RE next year. I guess they want to make it an annual franchise. That's never worked for anything other than Call of Duty. Even Ubisoft gave up on it. So back to RE3. There are 4 main reasons the game is a step down from RE2. 1. It's too short. 2. It's too linear. 3. It can't decide if it wants to be survival horror or action horror. And 4. It's not even a remake. While the game has other minor problems, they all either tie back into these 4 or could easily be ignored if these things were fixed. But before tackling this Herculean task, I'll take a moment to talk about the things I do like about this game. First off, the Nemesis redesign is great. At least, his first form is. His face is suitably terrifying for the more realistic aesthetic of the modern games. The trash bag coat looks weird, but I can see what they were going for. The boss fights against him are really solid. In the early game pursuits, he's incredibly fast and aggressive. Nemesis is far more of a threat than the zombies around him, and will easily beat Jill to a bloody pulp unless you have his kryptonite. One-hand grenade. Yeah, seriously, just one. In the original game, 16 standard grenade rounds weren't enough to take him down. Now, just one hand grenade. Fucking lame.
Lame, 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 lame!
At least he still drops items when he's stunned, but only the first 2 are unique. They're both upgrades for the handgun, and any further Nemesis KOs just drop ammo. I wish there was some kind of Easter egg for defeating him 7 times, but I guess this is passable. The Hunter Beta and Gamma look nice as well, the former a bit less iconic, but definitely more threatening. For the few of you who played the Ghost Stories free DLC for RE2, the regenerating Palehead zombies have returned, which is kinda cool. The shooting feels pretty good, even better than 2, despite what hack journalists might tell you. Every weapon feels as powerful as they should be, at least on standard difficulty. The shotgun one-shots zombies, the assault rifle can mow down multiple enemies in one magazine, as long as you aim for the head, and even the pistol can kill a zombie in 5 or 6 shots instead of 8 like RE2. The Magnum ends up being a little underused. You find it close to the end of the game and you don't get much ammo for it. But to compensate, the grenade launcher is buffed in damage and ammo availability. The dodge mechanic in this game is probably the best version of it this series has ever seen, definitely better than the original. Carlos straight up punches enemies in the face, and the slow-mo afterward feels badass as hell. Speaking of Carlos, his character has been improved a bit while maintaining the friendly attitude he had in the original. He's now both cool and a nice guy, maybe a little unrealistically so. Capcom also greatly expanded the role of Tyrell, a character you probably don't even remember in the original because he dies right after we meet him. Now Tyrell actually serves a supporting role for both protagonists, appearing for most of the second half of the game. Other than these few points, I'm glad that this story has remained mostly intact. The developers even added an explanation why Jill was still in Raccoon City at the start of the game. But that's where the positives end. If you've seen any review for this game, you've no doubt seen the reviewer mention that the game is too short. Well, simply put, it is. But it's not just the campaign's length that's the problem. The game is incredibly bare bones in terms of overall content. The 6-hour story is literally all there is. And what the reviewers I've seen have neglected to mention is that those 6 hours are padded by nearly 2 hours of cutscenes. There's not a single story in the entire history of Resident Evil that needs 2 hours of cutscenes. But honestly, I wouldn't even care if we got at least 8 hours of gameplay. You know what would have made the game longer? The fucking clock tower. This will probably be the first of several times I bring this up, but the clock tower and Gravedigger were clearly cut so that Capcom could rush the game out. Which is really scummy. Just fucking delay the game. We're all used to delays by now. So to stretch what little content the game has as far as possible, the devs added a bonus shop after you beat the game that gives you cheat items to help with higher difficulties and getting an S rank. I can't really blame the designers here because I'm sure they were pressed for time, but the method to actually get the points for the bonus shop are questionable at best. Basically, you have to complete the challenges in the records menu, another carryover from RE2. Unlike RE2, a lot of the challenges are complete garbage. Kill 80 enemies with the Magnum, 400 with the assault rifle, 2,000 overall? This is fucking stupid and ripe to be exploited. What you can do, and what PowerPix's trophy guide actually recommends, is reload a checkpoint right after a segment with a bunch of enemies to farm kills so you can buy the infinite rocket launcher after one playthrough. And just like every other Resident Evil game, the rocket launcher is completely broken. If the special weapons forced you down to a B rank or lower, it wouldn't really matter. But for RE3, the devs opted to instead create even higher difficulty settings designed specifically for the bonus shop. Nightmare is unlocked after beating Hardcore, and it actually changes a few gameplay elements. Enemies have more health and are significantly more aggressive, meaning even zombies are a threat. Nemesis becomes impossible to outrun at this point, forcing you to get good at the dodge mechanic or buy the STARS manual from the bonus shop. A few items have been moved around as well, but as we'll find out later, because of the extreme linearity of the story, none of them force you to relearn the map, like other modes would in past games. The biggest changes are enemy spawns, including more Lickers, Hunters, and Nemesis Parasite zombies. You also get the Magnum at the beginning of the game, which is the best way to complete its respective kill challenges legitimately. After you beat Nightmare, you get Inferno mode, which even further cranks enemy aggression and removes checkpoints. Typewriters are common enough that this won't make much of a difference, and without a doubt you've got the infinite launcher at this point. I never farmed for kills since the infinite assault rifle is more fun anyway, and it gave me a chance to use the magical coins that give health regeneration and more damage and defense. But Inferno is so unforgiving that you basically need the infinite launcher in the STARS manual. The bonus shop has a couple of other useful items too, like extra hip pouches, the lockpick and bolt cutters from the start, a knife that sets people on fire, and the Raiden, a super magnum that kills enemies in one shot if you hit the weak point. So, if my theory is correct and the devs were crunched for time, the bonus shop was probably the best thing they could come up with. The fault lies with the greed of Capcom once again. The RE2 remake sales must have exceeded their expectations, and they rushed out RE3. Luckily, the game's length is something that could be fixed with some substantial free DLC, but I wouldn't get my hopes up. This is still a corporation we're talking about. Now this is a problem that can't be fixed. The layout of the game world was decided early on, and nothing short of an entirely new game would make it more interesting to traverse. The linearity baffles me. The original RE3 had probably the largest map in the entire series, and while a lot of the exploring was mandatory backtracking for train parts, it really felt like Raccoon City was this huge labyrinthine maze of alleyways. So I couldn't believe that the small area in the demo was the most open section of the remake. This alone is a compelling argument for Problem 4. How can you say it's a remake if basic design principles from the original have been completely thrown out? The game is so linear at times that they should rename it Uncharted Evil. It already has the crazy set pieces, it just needs an actually likable protagonist. We'll get to that later. And give the zombies AKs and it would pretty much be the same thing. Literally half of this game is a series of chase sequences. Don't get me wrong, in concept this is a great idea for implementing Nemesis. The issue is that the chases are all highly scripted. This is apparent from the very beginning of the game, where you basically just hold forward while watching a bunch of cutscenes of Nemesis throwing Jill around. Even the city segment, where the Nemesis chases actually seem more interactive, for lack of a better word, they're not. Nemesis is scripted to spawn in specific places if he's off screen, so it kind of breaks immersion and can even be exploited a little bit to your advantage. Honestly, if the game was longer, the linearity wouldn't be as bad. Resident Evil 4 is still my favorite in the franchise, and it's about as linear as it gets. But even besides the fact that RE4 has 12 hours of actual gameplay versus RE3's pitiful 4 hours, all of those 12 hours are completely interactive. Like I said in my very first video, one of the best things about RE4 is that you interact with every situation with the same tools you've had since the start. Outside of QuickTime events and the Del Lago boss, every moment of gameplay controls the same. In RE3, this mostly holds true as well, but control is taken away from you far too often, even outside of cutscenes. It gets really obnoxious on repeat playthroughs, because you'll end up hitting escape and spacebar to skip these moments at least 30 times over the course of the game. I really wish I had more to say on this subject, because it pisses me off on principle, but I'm just going to end up repeating myself, so let's move on. Here we are, once again. The eternal struggle of Resident Evil. Survival versus action. I love both genres, but rarely do they mix well. The two conflict in many ways, from the ammo to the progression systems, and of course, the combat. The RE2 remake did a pretty good job of sprinkling in bits of shooting mechanics to make killing zombies fun instead of just a waste of resources. The weapon upgrades were a nice carryover from the original that made the game feel a little more action-y with the new mechanics. But while these additions made the game more modern and engaging, at its heart, it's still a survival horror game. RE3, on the other hand, rides the line. It reminds me a bit of the first RE Revelations, which tried to have both action and horror segments, which anyone will tell you was really jarring. The sections where you played as Chris and Valley Girl weren't great, but the ones with Dumb and Dumber were even worse.
Pass me the screwdriver.
Sure, huh?
Please, don't tell me you dropped it. Okay, where is it?
I know I had it up until this point.
Hold up. I bet you dropped it when you tripped.
RE3 never has anything that egregious, but it does feel like a cross between RE2 Remake and RE5, which is both good and bad. The good part is that you get to fight a lot of enemies at the same time, with the appropriate firepower to take them down. And thanks to the dodge mechanic, the boss fights feel more skill-based instead of position-based like RE2. The bad part is that the shooting still isn't really made for third-person shooting. The anti-bloom, or focus mechanic, or whatever it's called, was clearly designed around slow-paced gunplay. And when you throw in more aggressive enemies and a dodge with slow-mo, you can see where the two styles clash. There's no reward for killing enemies, so it still feels like a waste of resources. The constant battle between satisfying combat and cautious resource management is a balance that very few games pull off, if any. Even RE4 and 5 give you too much ammo to ever be concerned with conserving it. RE3 gives you enough ammo to kill every enemy in the game, so that's yet another problem. But honestly, that's been a struggle for this franchise since the original RE2. I know I'm in the minority here, but if Capcom wants to add more enemies and action mechanics, they should just make another RE4 or 5. As much as the fanbase loves to hate RE5, the mechanics were top notch. Add in the dodge from this game, have enemies drop money and ammo, bring back weapon upgrades to buy with the money, and have an atmosphere of horror, and you would have the perfect action horror game. Instead, we keep getting these weird blends that can't seem to decide what kind of game they want to be.
Nikolai!
Jill!
Go after Nikolai! He's got the vaccine!
What about you?
We're running out of time. I've got this.
I know you do.
Look, just so you know, this is the last fucking time.
If you can believe it. This was actually what baffled me most of all about this game. The RE2 remake faithfully recreated large sections of the police station, while adding in a lot of new rooms and rearranging the structure of the building to make more sense from a realism perspective. The sewers were a lot different in layout, but maintained the spirit of the original. The only changes I didn't like were the removal of the marshalling yard and the drastic aesthetic change of the laboratory. But that's a discussion for another video. The point is that RE2 is successfully both a remake and a reimagining. It stands on its own and pays proper respect to the original. As you no doubt already know, RE3 does not pay respect to the original. Even if we completely ignore the removal of the clock tower and gravedigger, which I will never let go, the devs didn't even try to remake any of the areas from the original game. Sure, Raccoon City is still a city, but none of the actual parts of the city resemble the original. No weird puzzles, the restaurant is completely different, there's only a couple alleyways, the train is now a subway, no Raccoon Park, the list goes on. The only new area is yet another sewer, probably an excuse to reuse assets from RE2. I'll give the devs credit on the revisit to the police department and the hospital section, but that's it. Some of the changes are just strange, like the decision to make Zombie Brad canon instead of remaking the iconic scene where he gets killed by Nemesis, or relegating the brain suckers, or drain demos, to the power station and then you never see them again. Also, the complete redesign of Nemesis's second and third forms. The second form looks pretty good actually, like a Bloodborne boss, but it doesn't really capture the spirit of the original. The boss fights are cool, so I won't knock it too hard, but the redesign was just unnecessary. The third form though, what the fuck were they thinking? This giant mass of flesh could crush Jill in an instant. To quote my Dead Space review, they chose generic boss fight design number 12, which is basically really big guy leans over a platform and tries to smash you. Kind of a disappointing conclusion. This is why I compared the game to Resident Evil 5. Jill picks up an 8-foot-long railgun with her wimpy arms multiple times and blasts Nemesis to bits. This is one step down from boulder punching, people. And then we have the problem of Jill. If this video gets any mainstream attention, I know I'm going to get hate for this, but she's just straight up unlikable. They tried making her a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, but they just made her a bitch. She's an ass to everyone in this game except Brad, and yet Carlos keeps complimenting her and calling her super cop, which is cringy as hell. She also has these bizarre one-liners with Nemesis, which, again, I can't describe as anything other than cringe. Just listen to this.
Come on, you creepy ass stalker. You want stars? I'll give you stars. It's my turn, bitch. Bitch can't even swim.
Yes, queen! Yes, queen! Yes, queen!
After all, a queen is someone not to be with.
You can only blame so much of this on the voice actress. Although I would say she was definitely a poor choice, as she has a tendency to sound shrill and petty whenever she tries to sound cool. A lot of this just comes down to bad writing. And look at her redesign. Could they have made it any more generic? I know they wanted to desexualize her, but they went way too far. I don't know if there was some feminist consulting on this game, or the American branch of Capcom was meddling in development, but this is just sad. How could they have done such a good job with Claire, but fucked up royally with Jill? I just don't get it.
Come on! Next time, take the fucking hit!
This might be a bit of mood whiplash, but believe it or not, I actually like this game. But mostly just because of the game mechanics. Gameplay will always be king in my eyes. That being said, this game is not worth $60. I'm convinced that the only reason that shitty Project Resistance game exists is so Capcom could sell this game for $60. I painstakingly completed every achievement in the game to try and squeeze as much joy as I could out of it, and I still feel ripped off. If you're still interested in RE3 after the various problems I've covered, pick it up for $30 or less, which is what it should have cost in the first place. It's sad because this game had a lot of potential, but Capcom's greed got to the best of them. Let's hope that against all odds, this series can pull off being annual, but I wouldn't get my hopes up. I'm tired of my favorite franchises being exploited and milked dry for all they're worth, and you should be too. I fear the day they finally remake RE4, but until then, let's hope Capcom gets the message. Vote with your wallets, people. Well, another year, another gaming disappointment. Honestly, I could have rambled on for a lot longer, but you've heard me drone on long enough. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't, detail my gamer misogyny in the comments below. Next video is going to be something completely different. Maybe a bit more digestible for a casual audience. Feel free to call me a sellout when the video comes out. See you next time, guys.